In the third and final video for the monopolistic competition market structures lesson, we'll be looking at a couple of industries to focus on exam techniques of analysis and evaluation. So we start with a short and simple question. We've got some basic data here for you to read through and a nice simple explain question at the end of it. Explain the likely market structure of the UK gin industry. What's important here is that in that explanation you need some direct reference to the text in your answer. So please stop the video, have a careful read through it, write out your answer, which should just be a short one, and then restart the video when you're ready. Okay, let's work through points that you would want to put into your answer to this question. So we would start with, there are lots of producers. There's evidence in the text for lots of producers with a small scale output. There's also evidence of very fast growth in the industry, and it would be good to quote some of the numbers about that. It tells us there are low barriers to entry because so many new producers are coming into the market. That must be the case. And finally, we know that there's a differentiated product. They've each got something unique about their particular brand of gin. And therefore, we can conclude this must be monopolistic competition. Okay, let's move on to a bigger case study. Here we're going to be looking at the UK taxi and private vehicle hire or private hire vehicle industry. So what we know about this is it's a very fragmented market. You've got some data here from 2019. 75,500 taxis and 226 licensed private hire vehicles in England and Wales. 37% of all of those are in London, so there's a huge concentration of the market in the London area. It's estimated that 80% of UK taxis are small owner-operated businesses, so we're not talking about big, lots of big companies here, we're talking about lots of small competitors. And in April 2019, the ONS, Office of National Statistics, estimated that the average annual pay for a taxi driver, £21,167, and of those, only 2% of the drivers are female. Okay, so if you had been on a night out in London or in your own sort of local big town, what options would you have if you needed a cab home at the end of your night out? So let's look through some of the options. There are plenty of them. First of all, if you're in London, you could get a London black cab. There are over 21,000 of those available. Entry is restricted to those with a licence, and that licence they have to get from Transport for London. And drivers have to have passed a test called the Knowledge, which is, on average, takes people about 2 years to pass. If you didn't want to pay for a London black cab, you could go to Uber. I'm sure we've all heard of Uber by now. They are massive, spread across 65 countries, 75 million Uber passengers, 3.9 million drivers. In London alone, there are 45,000, so that's more than twice as many Uber drivers as London black cab drivers. Entry is much less restricted, just those with a car and those with a phone and not much else. And if you don't want to use Uber, well, there are other ride-hailing apps available. You could use Lyft or Get or Bolt or one of the others that have come into the market. Or you could go for a minicab or a private hire vehicle. Now, you can't just hail them from the side of the street, sort of wave them down and ask them to give you a ride. You've got to book them either on the phone or internet or just by walking into their office and pre-booking your ride. Most of them are licensed, but there are some unlicensed operators out there as well. And then another option is a big firm, Addison Lee. So this was founded in 1975 by John Griffin, who had just one car then. They're now a major competitor to the black cabs. They carry more than 10 million passengers per year and were bought by a hedge fund manager in July 2013. So those are the options you've got available. Let's have a look at their pricing, and what we can see here is the price structure for just for the London black cabs, and this is set out by TfL. They all charge the same prices for journeys of the same length, And you can see that it's not very cheap. There's a minimum fare of £3.20 at all times, but if you're travelling just 1 mile, you're likely to be paying at least £6.20. So that could rise even up to £92 for a journey between Heathrow Airport and central London. So here's a question for you. Imagine that you are a new entrant to the taxi and private hire vehicle industry, an independent entrant with your own vehicle, and suggest 3 ways in which you could use price competition in order to establish your business, and 3 ways in which you could use non-price competition. So please stop the video, have a think about your answers to that, jot down your answers on your worksheet or a separate piece of paper, and restart when you're ready. Now we're going to look through our suggestions to answer these questions. So first of all, some examples of price competition. You might have pre-arranged, agreed fares with customers so that they don't get any nasty surprises when they arrive at their destination. Or you might have some sort of different pricing depending on the time of day or the distance that they're going. You might offer a different price for people who call you from the side of this road rather than from those who have pre-booked, who'd probably get a cheaper price. Or you might offer some sort of inducement like buy 2 get 1 free, which in effect reduces the price of 3 journeys. Looking at non-price competition, you might have luxury cars, so you might be offering a much nicer car than the average taxi or private hire vehicle. You might have a car which has disabled access, and that would be a market which has far fewer competitors supplying it. You might offer late pickup times, sort of early hours of the morning. Not all taxi drivers are prepared to do that. Finally, you might offer female drivers, if you either female yourself or you employ a female driver, for female clients who might prefer that. Now, there are some limitations of the model of monopolistic competition, as there are with most economic theories. So first of all, in the real world, information may be imperfect. Why is that? Well, because the use of non-price competition means that there's lots of advertising and branding, and that can mean that consumers have imperfect knowledge of the product or biased knowledge of the product. Secondly, when we're looking at these graphs, we have to restrict our analysis to one firm within the market, not to the whole market. Because each firm produces a differentiated product, they're not the same as each other. So therefore, the analysis of them will not be the same. Entry barriers can be created by non-price competition. Why would you do that? Why do you want to create entry barriers to your industry? Well, in order to make demand for your product more price inelastic, and that gives you the power to keep your price a bit higher and to keep making supernormal profits. And finally, always remember that what the model is focusing on is just the price and output decisions. That's what we see in the graph. But in practice, because analysis is restricted to each firm because they're differentiated products, each firm will also need to make a decision about exactly what their product is going to be like. How are they going to differentiate it? What's its variety going to be? And how much do they want to spend on advertising and branding it? So there are differences between firms that you should bear in mind. Finally, we're going to look at an exam style question. Here's a typical exam question. So in the light of the information provided, assess the likely profitability of a firm in the taxi or private vehicle hire industry. Use diagrammatic analysis to support your answer. So this is obviously a data response question. We've just gone through quite a lot of data about the taxi and private hire vehicle industry, and that's going to be used as the basis of your answer. So here are some tips that we can work through. First of all, in terms of knowledge and application, use the data, the information you've been provided with, to explain why this is likely to be monopolistic competition and how that differs from both perfect competition and oligopoly. Then we move on to analysis. So here we're trying to form those logical chains of analysis. So draw graphs to show the short run and the long run equilibrium in monopolistic competition so that you can show the difference between the two. And then explain why the firm might move from the short run to the long run with clear reference to the information provided about the market. and then move on to evaluation. So what actions could a firm take to avoid losing that supernormal profit in the long run? What changes in the economy might have an effect on a firm's profitability? What else might their profitability depend on? And each of those points you should apply to the particular industry, in this case, the taxi and private hire vehicle industry. That's the subject of the question. Why not try writing up a full answer for that question and send it to your teacher for their comments? And that brings us to the end of the third and final video in this lesson about monopolistic competition and market structures. Thank you for completing it.